friends, it's Kay. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am here to bring you some academia books I have been loving lately. So at this point, I just accepted that academia and I are intertwined. I am a major, I love academia settings, institutes, and I love when it's used as a plot device in books. But I'm going to bring you today 5 books that I have read that I really enjoyed and I would like to recommend to all of you fellow academia lovers. The first one I'm going to talk about, I would say, leans more into light academia, even though there is a murder plot going on. And that is A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons. And I read this book, I think in 2022, and it was one of my favorites of that year. It was just a really fun time, and I think it really captured a historical academia setting so well. So we are following Saffron Everly, yes, Saffron Everly in post-World War I London, and she is an assistant botany professor, or a TA kind of, at Oxford. And while she's at a party with her mentor, someone drops dead. And of course, her mentor is blamed for this because it is a rare poison of sorts. But Saffron knows that her mentor / father figure would never do this. So now she is taking it on herself to figure out who really murdered this person. And along the way, she teams up with Alexander Ashton, a man, and together they try to investigate who was responsible for this poisoning. And when I was reading it, and I do have a blog where I did read it if you'd like to check that out, but I compared this to Murdoch Mysteries. And if you've never seen it, it's on Acorn or Ovation. So good. But I just really loved these two, and of course there are just some really great scenes, and they are one of my favorite couples, and Saffron is one of my favorite characters I've read about. And on top of all of that, it was an academia setting, which I just thoroughly enjoyed. Now we're going to move into something I like to call gothic medical horror, but make it academia. And I have 2 books that are kind of that neat subtrope genre to recommend to you, because I have learned this is something I thoroughly enjoy. And the first one I'm going to talk to you about is probably more wider known, but it is Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. And this is a Frankenstein retelling. And I have learned that of the classic books, Frankenstein is one of my favorite stories to be retold. I don't know what it says about me that medical experiments and really shady ethics in science is one of my favorite things to read about, but we're going to skim past it now. Anyway, so in this book we are following a dual timeline. And all you really have to know going into this is that there are 2 siblings who live with their grandmother, and their grandmother runs a really well-known institute or asylum, and one day their grandmother brings home a new sister for them, except something is not quite right about her. I was jaw-dropped by some of the twists in here, and there was a connecting point that I really just didn't see coming, and I really enjoyed this, and it kind of set me on my gothic medical trajectory and my gothic horror preference that kind of leaned into the rest of 2024. And that comes to this next book I read during the hurricane that hit Florida. While I was hunkered down with no power, I read this on my Kindle in 2 days, and it is probably one of my favorite books of this year, and that is The Specimen. And can we just take a moment to appreciate the cover, because it's really one of my favorite things. But in this book, we are in a historical setting. We are in 1800s Edinburgh, and we are following a mother who has lost her son. Now, her son has a really rare heart defect, and it is terminal, but she had more time with him until he is kidnapped after they visit an exhibit that demonstrates some medical anomalies in science. And she kind of goes through a mourning period. She never really picks herself back up again until she's dragged to this medical show again, and she sees a heart in a jar that looks surprisingly similar to the condition her son had, and she thinks she's hearing voices coming from it. This book was so good, y'all, and the history aspect was tied into it. It was so good, you guys. I highly recommend this book. It is not being talked about enough. It just came out, and I highly recommend you check it out if you are either a academia or historical or even just a gothic horror lover. I really enjoyed this one, and I really need someone to scream about it with. Now, speaking of darker academia and body horror, if you know, you know, Blood Over Brighthaven, I finally read a book by this author, and I am invested. I love this book. We have a morally gray female main character, and she is the first woman to be going as a mage in this institute, and it's very historical. And of course, the men there don't want a strong woman who can best them at everything in charge. So they one of the heads of this ends up giving her a janitor as her research assistant, which is pretty much a slap to the face. It is a insult, but little do they know that this janitor was once a hunter from a people who come beyond their city's walls, and together the two of them form a partnership, and they end up discovering a lot of secrets that this institution and this city wants to keep hidden. It's so good, and there is a romance element in here that I personally really loved. They had me literally crying. Obviously, the fantasy plotline overtakes that, but it was so good, and I really enjoyed this one. It had the lab time, it had the stakes that academia has on people, it had the cutthroat kind of society that comes about that, as well as what people would do to keep secrets in academia. If you haven't checked it out yet, highly recommend you do. And now this last one I'm going to talk to you about personally was not my favorite thing, but one of my favorite things about this book was the academia element to it, and that is Second Time's the Charm. First of all, just the title is everything to me. But I, as an environmental major in college, I had a lot of my friends be on the marine biology side of things. So as I was reading this book, my favorite part of it was actually the shark lab elements to it. And if you don't know what that means, shark lab is essentially when marine biologists and researchers go onto a boat and they capture and tag sharks. And that can be for a variety of reasons. In this book, for instance, there's like a pregnant shark ultrasound element, there's just tags to see migration patterns, all that kind of stuff. But the romance, I love a second chance romance, but that was not the part of this book that I loved the most. I really just loved being on this boat with this team of researchers and the influencer element, because they are also making a kind of YouTube-esque style videos or documentary style-esque videos about shark lab research and sharks, and in general trying to just spread that sharks are not all bad. And honestly, I'm going to caveat and say that if you are not a big fan of like the marine side of things, or if you do not really care about learning about sharks, for instance, you probably won't enjoy this one near as much unless you're really going into it for that second chance romance. But honestly, I liked it. It was really good to me. It wasn't my favorite, but I really still wanted to put it on this list because I've not heard really anyone be talking about it. And I know there's a lot of fellow scientists or maybe marine biologists out there who would really like this romance, so I wanted to throw it out to you. I also want to take the time to talk to you about 4 other academia books I got this year that came out this year that I've not really heard too many other people talking about, and I would just love to put them on your radar as well. So starting with The Ornithologist Field Guide to Love. First of all, is this not just the most academia cover? Like, it's so pretty, and not to mention, I just really love the Field Guide to Love. Like, just, it humored me, okay? So, 2 rivals hunt through England for a rare magical bird in this historical fantasy rom-com reminiscent of Indiana Jones. I love the author's Instagram. She posts all these really fun aesthetics and just memes, and if you haven't checked her out yet, please do so. But she has posted so many aesthetic pictures of this one, and I just really love the like academia vibe to it, and I think it's just going to be a really solid romance, and I'm really, really excited to read it. Then we have Given Art History, and I have seen some more mixed opinions about this one, but I am still so deeply excited to check it out because these are about ex-childhood best friends to lovers, which is one of my favorite like second chance romance tropes, I would say. But also, it's about 2 history professors, and this year I am a history teacher, so sign me up. And now this one I got in my birthday month, May, Fairy Loot subscription for YA, and that is The Temptation of Magic. It's just so stinking pretty, and I need y'all to get the full picture because art history students are going bananas everywhere. And then of course we cannot forget the iconic. So I don't want to know too much going into this one, but it of course involves art history, as you may have guessed from the design. But it involves art history, and there are these magical creatures, and I'm pretty sure it's like a Monster Hunter element to it. Oh, I think it's like Monster Hunter and Monster again. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm getting from this. But super excited, and I know there's a romantic element to it as well that I'm highly looking forward to. And last but not least, this is probably the one I know the least amount about, but I got it in an Aardvark subscription box, and that is The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door. And honestly, I love the cover for starters. But what I know about this one, honestly, all I really know is that it is like a magical academy or a magical institute, and they are focusing on how fairy doors help or hurt the war effort of World War I. And I am always on the search for more World War I fiction. I think it is a lot less talked about, but it's also so devastatingly fascinating to me. So I'm always on the lookout for more World War One era stories. And let me see if I completely butchered something or not. Okay, so yeah, so her brother, I guess, our main character, he was one of the few survivors of the deadly ferry attack on battlefields of World War One. So, super excited. I love historical fantasy and, of course, love an academia setting. Alright, so that is all from me today, friends. Thank you so much for sticking out and watching this video. I loved being able to chat with you again about one of my favorite niches and tropes in book and storytelling. And if you have any academia book recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I'm always on the lookout for new ones. And if you want to find more of me, my socials are also linked down below. And I hope you stick around and hit that subscribe button. But until next time, I'm Kay. Bye!